Craft matters. In small ways, like how a coffee is brewed. And in not so small ways, like how your money is cared for. Which is why for 160 years, UBS has elevated banking to a craft. Tailoring unique strategies that combine human expertise with the latest technologies. All happening across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs. With you at the heart of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 21st of January 2026 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up.
I think I have a lot of messages for Davos, but the primary message is how well the United States is doing.
Donald Trump heads to Davos, but who will stand up to him? Our team will be in the World Economic Forum and also at Zurich Airport, where we were expecting the US president's arrival, but a faulty Air Force One has meant he's been delayed. Plus,
I'm Andrew Muller, and I'll have more from Nuuk as Monocle Radio continues its run of special programmes from Greenland's capital.
Andrew Muller will bring us the latest view from Nuuk and a second fatal train crash in Spain. We'll have an update plus the latest on the investigation into Sunday's crash in the south of the country. The number of those killed has now reached 40. The Spanish Prime Minister has pledged to investigate. We'll have more on why a ceasefire between the Syrian government and Kurdish militia might be about to crack, plus the papers and a recap of LVMH's Watch Week. That's all coming up on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. A court in Japan has handed down a life sentence to the man who shot the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at an election rally 3.5 years ago. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung says the North is producing enough nuclear material each year to arm about 20 warheads. And the tech billionaire Elon Musk has picked a fight with the owner of Ryanair, Michael O'Leary, over the possible use of Mr. Musk's Starlink satellite services on Ryanair planes. Mr. O'Leary doesn't want them. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, Donald Trump plus entourage is en route to Davos, albeit not in the manner he wished. A technical fault with Air Force One has delayed his journey, but he is reportedly on his way, albeit on a slightly less glamorous plane. But the past 2 days at the World Economic Forum have served as little more than a warm-up act for the US president's arrival. Mr. Trump has certainly pushed buttons in the last 48 hours, reiterating a pledge to grab Greenland and not ruling out military action to achieve this. This caused the dollar and the US stocks to tumble, not what WEF needs now. Well, I'm joined by our senior foreign correspondent, Carlotta Rebello, who's in Davos. And I'm also delighted to say that in the studio, the media strategist, Mark Edelman, joins me too. Very good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning, Emma.
Carlotta, let's come to you first. I mean, what on earth is happening at Davos at the moment? Because everybody was expecting Donald Trump and it's not yet happening. So is everybody in a flurry?
Emma, this has been an edition of the World Economic Forum's meeting that no one could have predicted. I mean, just looking at images from yesterday, who could have imagined Emmanuel Macron delivering a speech with mirrored sunglasses? I think no one could escape those pictures. But yes, the big news this morning is, as you know, that Donald Trump is now delayed. He's en route. Last time I checked the route, he was somewhere over Nova Scotia. So he should be here on time for his speech, which is scheduled for later at 2:30 p.m. But the latest news coming out before he departed Washington, D.C. is that he has agreed to a Greenland meeting on the sidelines of Davos. Now, we don't have information of exactly who will be present, but we know that that is meant to be happening at some point this afternoon or later this evening. We need to reiterate the fact that this is the biggest U.S. delegation ever to come here, around 300 people, and that includes everyone, including the support staff. But it is a hefty presence, and, you know, Davos is bracing for it. The train up from Clusters this morning was the busiest it's been all week. I don't know if you can hear in the background, but just a group of members from the Swiss Armed Forces just arriving now and taking their positions. 5,000 army personnel have been dispatched here. And, we had warnings, participants have received warnings today to expect additional security checks and possible internet disruption from the moment the president touches down in Davos.
Okay, so we have all that to come. Mark, let me bring you in here. Yesterday, there were 2 or 3 phenomenally powerful speeches from the likes of the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, from Emmanuel Macron in his sunglasses, and from the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. All of them setting out at, dare I say it, quite an aggressive stance.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you've got the President of the United States coming in to deliver some type of chest-thumping speech to the extent that he wants Greenland, and he doesn't understand why nobody in Europe doesn't think he should have it. And by the way, his flight having to turn back to D.C. is almost a commercial for him to have Greenland, because if he did, he could just have returned there. But in all seriousness, I think that the amount of sort of disruption that this is causing at a time right now where, frankly, the world is pretty disrupted, the idea that we're all coming together to speak about Greenland and Nuuk is quite fascinating. And
indeed, just staying with you, Mark, I mean, Mark Carney yesterday said the rules-based way of doing things was partly false. I mean, what an incredible admission to things. Saying that, in the past, the strongest would be exempt, but great powers are now using economic integration as weapons. It's not just economic integration, it is Greenland. It is absolutely every single level of the way that the world, a highly globalized world, does business, seems at great speed to be just being shattered.
100%. I think, the more people you talk to, this idea that the United States is trying to assert its power in the world actually is winding up, in my opinion, making it look much smaller. And when you've got somebody like Mark Carney who says in our own backyard, basically, that we've just made a deal with China on electric vehicles, that is kind of flabbergasting. And the idea that he also said, to the extent that China at this point is a more reliable trading partner than the United States, my God. I mean, talk about the American century that we just lived through, maybe not being in this part of the world anymore. Insane.
Carlotta, just tell us what happened yesterday, because we had these hugely powerful speeches.
Absolutely. And other than Mark Carney, the one that stood out for me, which, we were so used to, almost to its unfold, but we know that speeches coming from the European Union, being the Commission or the Parliament, tend to be a lot of the same virtual signaling. But yesterday's speech by Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, was actually really powerful. I mean, there's sentences about, how nostalgia won't bring back the old world order really resonated with the room. And then, of course, echoed the words as well from Mark Carney saying that, the world is in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. The thing that also is sticking out to me is the fact that, we know that here in Davos matters as much what's happening inside the Congress Center and what's happening outside. And we see the money on the promenade, which companies are investing big on the houses. And not surprisingly, AI and tech companies are dominating those houses. But dare I say that everything that's been happening with Donald Trump, which he hasn't even arrived in, Switzerland and has already dominated the conversation since Sunday, maybe geopolitics has finally taken over AI in terms of the key points of discussion here up in the mountains.
So that's one thing that people are now, focusing their energies on. But when you have the likes of Macron and Ursula von der Leyen standing up against Trump, is there a sense that Europe is about to call Trump's bluff, especially when it comes to Greenland?
Well, I think this is a test for Europe and a test for European leaders that work as a bloc that certainly in NATO's case, the United States helped create. And, look, if the United States wants to work, I mean, I can't reiterate when I really think about this, like we are allies in every sense of the word. We work together. We do training exercises together in our military. We share intelligence. this idea that all of a sudden the President of the United States is being seen as an adversary to a world sensibility that's existed since 1945 is quite incredible. And I think that, Trump is counting on that. Some of the fissures that have always existed in the European Union and in NATO, very, very papered over, will sort of erupt, and he'll be presented Greenland on a plate like he was hoping the Nobel would come his way.
I mean, adopting the brace position, I think, is something that you've mentioned a little earlier, Carlotta, about talking about the hefty presence of the United States. And just writing in the Financial Times today, the US Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, says, far too long, the fate of the global economy has been decided by an international establishment who took America's economic power and gave it to the rest of the world. This administration is putting America first. We're aggressively rebuilding manufacturing, unleashing American energy. Is there a sense that, once Donald Trump and his astonishingly big entourage land at Davos, by whatever means, that this American energy will basically derail the ability for anything else at Davos to be done?
Look, if there's one thing I've learned over the past couple of days is that making predictions, I'm mostly going to be off the mark because things are changing so fast here. But what I will say, Emma, is that we're already seeing that America First a message out even before the entourage arrives. I was at the USA House yesterday, and, the fact that the USA House is obviously celebrating what they're calling Freedom 250. This is the anniversary of the 250 years of the independence of the United States, and the whole thing is a push for, American patriotism, America first, why, all eyes should be set on the U.S. We know that there's a few senators, a few ambassadors, and secretaries of state stopping by the House throughout the week. No word yet whether Trump will make an appearance, but we think that he might. But this narrative of America First is happening even before Trump arrives. Now, I wanted to pick up on something that Mark said, because this idea of, exposing, or Trump using and exposing the fissures that already existed in the European Union, to me makes me wonder if the reaction we're starting to see from the EU is them actually acknowledging those fissures and trying to mitigate them. Will this push for closer union? Will this push for the EU to finally resolve some of the internal issues it had? We know that, the push towards increasing NATO spend and defense spending has pushed for the EU to start to have some serious conversations about defense budgets and the possibility of an European army. So I don't know, perhaps having all of this exposed for the world to see, thanks to Donald Trump, could benefit the EU in the long run.
Mark, does Europe need to put its money where its mouth is?
That's the big question. And what does that look like? I mean, what I will say is, if we're going to play into the trope of America First, nothing makes America stronger than a solidified and strong and supported Europe. And this idea that breaking up alliances that have existed for decades is good for the United States is crazy. And if you look at our stock market yesterday, it was the lowest it's been since October. I think it dropped 870 points. And I was looking in one of the other papers today, gold is back to being the most bought standard in the world. This is not what America First is supposed to be. And I would say, look, not to make it political, but everything is political. If you're somebody who voted for Donald Trump, and I understand a lot of reasons why those people may have done that, Greenland was not on their bingo card.
Mark Edelman here in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. And Carlotta, you'll be posting the briefing from Davos a little bit later on, won't you?
Yes, we'll be bringing you the briefing from Davos at 1300 Davos time. That's midday in London. Our own Laura Kramer will be poised at Zurich Airport. Hopefully by then we will have an Air Force land in Swiss soil and the president somewhere in the air coming to the Swiss mountain. Just before I let you go, Emma, we can see now the queue around the block to get into the Congress Center. So he might be a few hours away, but people are already bracing.
We can't wait. Everybody adopting the brace position. And we'll be doing some plane spotting a little bit later.
Santa Claus coming to town.
It's literally that. We'll be doing a bit of plane spotting a bit later as well, as our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, will be joining us to tell us about the plane that the president is really in. You're listening to The Globalist. Now, while the leaders of the EU, France and Canada staked out their positions on Greenland yesterday, Donald Trump said there was no going back on his campaign to take control of the place. Well, Monocle's contributing editor Andrew Muller is out in Nuuk with the Monocle team for us all week. He sent us this dispatch.
Becoming the apple of a US president's eye is, it turns out, a mixed blessing. Among the people we've spoken to in Nuuk was a CEO in Greenland's tourism sector who acknowledged a huge spike in enquiries and bookings since Donald Trump started laying claim to the territory, but said it had tapered recently as people started to worry that Trump might actually be serious. Basically, the CEO told us, if Trump shut up about Greenland now, the last year could just about be assessed a net positive, at least from a business perspective. But other people we have spoken to have worried that even if Trump was distracted by some new mania, or perhaps a passing squirrel, lasting damage will have been done. That Greenland will never again feel quite so gloriously remote, quite so splendidly invulnerable, quite so contentedly self-contained. This is not an easy place to live. Greenland's situation is remote, its climate harsh, its landscape austere. But it is noticeable how many of the people we've met left for a while, then returned, unable to find anywhere else that felt quite so much like home. And they'd like to keep it as they know it. In Nuuk for Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller. Back to you in London.
And that was Andrew Muller in Nuuk. We'll be hearing from Andrew and all the team out in Greenland on The Daily later on today. You're listening to Monocle Radio. This is The Globalist. Now, the authorities in the Spanish region of Catalonia have suspended all suburban train travel following a deadly accident on a commuter train. It's the second fatal rail crash in 3 days in Spain. To tell us more, Monocle's Madrid correspondent Liam Aldous joins us. Good morning, Liam.
Good morning, Emma. Yeah, it really has been a horror week on Spanish rail network this week. Of course, we had the incredibly horrible crash on Sunday night in which 42 people lost their lives. And now last night, we're just getting the news that there was another crash in Catalonia. This one, the causes are actually quite obvious. There has been torrential rain around Catalonia over the last few days, and a section of retaining wall has collapsed, and the train has collided with that wall and has come off the rails, and the driver has lost his life. But the chaos that both crashes have caused across the national rail network is ricocheting around the country. Obviously, Catalonia has suspended all of its regional rail services, leaving 400,000 commuters without alternatives for the unforeseeable future. They haven't said how long the rail network will be suspended. They're going to check all the tracks in the meantime. And of course, the main high-speed rail link between Andalusia and Madrid is still suspended as well. So there's a lot of chaos for passengers and travelers in Spain at the moment.
What's been the wider reaction from the Spanish public, given the fact that the images from Sunday night gave such a horrifying view of what could happen when the high-speed rail network goes wrong, and now we have a more regional network experiencing a problem?
Yeah, there's a lot of people asking a lot of questions. Obviously, politics in Spain is always fractured, so there's been a bit of political point scoring, particularly from the far right, trying to point the blame directly at the ministers and the prime minister. There has been a bit of a truce between the main conservative opposition and the leading socialist party because there are 3 days of mourning declared across Spain. There's also been a lot of coverage in the media of small stories of heroism from the first crash on Sunday night. Of course, you had the mayor of the town where the crash occurred being one of the first people on the scene, and we've seen lots of young people heading to the scene. The whole town mobilized to help the injured out of the train. The problem was the first crash occurred in a section of track which was very hard to access for vehicles. So the people in the local town ran there on foot and were actually like helping people out of the tracks. There was also this so-called quad bike hero, Gonzalo Sanchez, who was a lottery ticket salesman who mobilized his quad, got some tools, and was actually ferrying people from the crash site to the town for the hospital. So there has been a lot of focus on the human side of the tragedy. But as far as the rail network is concerned, a lot of people love the national rail network in Spain is a source of national pride. A lot of people use it. It's the world's second longest high-speed rail network in the world. And the fact that it's being called into question is, it's a real dent to like the national feeling, and also the way the Spanish experience their country. If they can't trust the rail network, then it really undermines their sense of national pride and their sense of self.
Liam Aldous, Monocle's Madrid correspondent, thank you so much for joining us on the line. Still to come on today's programme.
Morning, Emma, from Zurich Airport, where myself and about 30 plane spotters are eagerly waiting to watch President Trump land ahead of his appearance at Davos. He's delayed after Air Force One had to turn around due to a minor electrical issue, but spirits here are high despite the frosty wait.
We'll be joining Laura and the plane spotters a little bit later on The Globalist, so stay with us.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS's Chief Investment Office House View, we're focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals, so you get the big picture broken down into thought-provoking insights. Delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Let's have a look at today's newspapers. Joining me in the studio is Monocle's senior news editor, Chris Chermak. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Emma. What another busy news day.
There's quite a lot of headline rewriting going on, I suspect, in a lot of the papers. Just looking at the front page of the Financial Times, it's sort of a Trump scheduled to address Davos amid Greenland tensions. US president delayed trip risks changing economic forum schedule, including a planned speech. We'll be talking to our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, about, the reorganisation of a day like this, but this is a moment where people are writing and just riding it.
They are absolutely rewriting, wondering what's going to be happening in Davos. And actually, one of the stories I picked out on this theme that I thought was interesting from Politico is the Greenland turmoil eclipsing Ukraine at Davos. And I thought that was an interesting aspect of this to mention as well. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is also going to be in Davos, although, according to Politico, there were actually some debates within Ukraine whether it was even worth him going at this point, because Ukraine is so aware of this fact that Greenland is now eclipsing everything at Davos. There isn't even a set schedule yet of whether Zelensky will meet with Donald Trump. And just last week, we were talking about this on the briefing, on others, the push from European leaders for security guarantees for Ukraine, nearing a deal between Ukraine and Russia if those security guarantees can be agreed. All of that appears now up in the air, and it's not even clear Zelensky's people are trying to get a meeting in the schedule with Donald Trump. They still think that it's worth it. But you've had even, there's a quote in this story from the Norwegian foreign minister saying, there is a real war with the Russians going on in Ukraine. Greenland is taking energy away from what we should be talking about. So there is an understanding of this even among Europeans, but there really isn't much they can do about it right now.
And there is nothing they can do. And that question that you raised there about energy is that there is not limitless energy here. The fact remains is that there are only 24 hours in the day, much as Donald Trump would like us to think otherwise. And the fact that, I remember this time last year, he was doing what was called flooding the zone domestically. He was changing large swathes of the way that America did things domestically. And he did it at such a speed that no one could keep up. When you're dealing with the rest of the world, that's a completely different kettle of fish, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And I will just mention, speaking of energy, there's also this aspect of the real energy aspect in Ukraine, that it is facing the coldest winter it has since the war began, and energy infrastructure is being hit by Russia, consistently leaving many without power. In some cases, power is only on for about 4 hours in the day. So there is a real energy problem in Ukraine, which points to the fact that they really need help at this point, but they are being ignored because the energy in the room in Davos is currently focused on other things.
Okay, let's move on to a story here in the United Kingdom, which has enormous geopolitical consequences. The Chinese embassy, a mega embassy, which will be right slap bang in the heart of the British capital, has now been approved, despite very serious warnings from lots and lots of people.
There are lots of warnings. I find this story so interesting, also looking at like how serious the warnings are and not. But yes, this is going to be basically a mega embassy in the heart of London, close to the city of London, the financial district. That's the part that worries a lot of people. It's even near, say, fiber optic cables that transport vast amounts of sensitive data between banks and so on and so forth in London. So this is a 5.5 acre site. It's near the Tower of London. So it is right in the heart. And yes, this has been going on for years, but the approval has now been given by the UK's housing minister for this to go ahead, even though he said he is aware there are still legal challenges. So he said he considers the matter closed unless the legal challenges open this up once again. And there will be legal challenges because there are a lot of worries about what this embassy means. I did find, I have to say, interesting what even the sort of MI5 and GCHQ, the intelligence cybersecurity agencies, have said about this. They've basically said that, like any foreign embassy on UK soil, it's not realistic to expect that they can wholly eliminate each and every potential risk. So there is a risk there with China. At the same time, I did find it interesting as well. You know this personally, Emma, but there are 7 current locations of China's embassy around the UK, around London. There is some belief, at least, that if there is a silver lining to this, they will all now be in one place, and that the actually UK, to put one positive spin on it, some in the UK security agencies think actually it might be a bit better to have all of this in one place rather than 7 disparate locations. So it's a really interesting debate, and also goes to, of course, to the heart of geopolitics and what we think of China in this moment when we're also talking about Donald Trump.
Indeed, it is interesting what neighbours you have. Right, let's move to the Justice Department is ceasing prosecutions for Democrats who are risking who are sort of protesting or mounting some sort of objection to what is happening in Minnesota.
So this is a really interesting set of stories from the Washington Post about how the Justice Department and prosecutors are fighting this out at the state level and the federal level in the U.S. In Minnesota, you've seen the Justice Department bring investigations against the sitting governor, Tim Walz, and the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey. They have both been served with subpoenas yesterday in the U.S. They have to appear before a grand jury to answer for their criticisms of the federal government and immigration enforcement agencies that are on the ground in Minnesota, as we all know. What's interesting as well about this story from the Post is what kind of impact this is having on the Justice Department and U.S. attorneys across, frankly, the United States. In Minnesota, after the death of a protester, Renee Good, last week in Minnesota, you saw 10 U.S. attorneys, state attorneys in Minnesota, resign over the Justice Department and the immigration agencies' enforcement of the laws or attempted enforcement of federal laws in Minnesota. So what the Justice Department is having to do is basically bring in lawyers from other parts of the country into Minnesota in order to prosecute Democratic officials. And it's a similar story in Virginia, where there's been this big fight. It's a major state attorney's office. It's the one charged with Trump administration. Justice Department wants them to charge James Comey, former FBI head, as well as Letitia James, who's Attorney General in Georgia, who brought the election fraud charges against Donald Trump himself for 2020. They both want to. The Justice Department wants to charge them. They haven't been able to find anybody to actually charge them because there isn't really enough evidence out there. Lindsay Halligan, somebody who had no experience of being a prosecutor, was named head of the state attorney's office in Virginia. She is now out again because courts have fought her appointment in that role and actually threatened to punish anybody who said that she was the state attorney after they ruled that she had no qualification for this job and must be out of it. So there's a big fight among courts and the legal system in the U.S. about what the Justice Department is doing in trying to prosecute Democrats.
Finally, the Tagesspiegel in Germany is reporting on the fact that calling in sick is nicht erlaubt.
Nicht erlaubt in Germany. I love this story. It's been building for a while. It actually started also last week. The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is involved. This is a campaigning issue, Emma. He said this in a campaign stop that the epidemic of sickness in Germany has to stop. The average, he said, is 14.5 days, almost 3 weeks of Germans calling in sick.
That's a lot of sick.
That is a lot of sick. It's by some measures double the European average. And what they're tackling now, what's interesting is many politicians believe this is due to phone prescriptions and phone sort of sign-offs that you can get. So you call the doctor rather than appearing before the doctor. This is something that was introduced during the pandemic, and this is something that politicians are now saying they will review, and that's what the health minister is telling Tagesspiegel today. They are going to review the rules of whether you can get a medical slip off work just by a phone appointment or whether you actually have to go to the doctor. They blame this. I should say there have been studies also going around in Germany saying actually it's not really about the phone thing, it's about other stuff. There's no real evidence that just because you can use a phone instead of going to the doctor that you call in sick more. There are other issues at work here. Mental health being an issue that people are using more than in the past, and lung infections for that matter from the coronavirus. But it's such an interesting debate about how often you're allowed to call in sick, what the numbers are, and it is a campaign issue in Germany.
Chris Cermak, in fine health, Monocle senior news editor. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're listening to The Globalist. I looked at some of the other stories we're keeping an eye on today. A court in Japan has handed down a life sentence to the man who shot the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at an election rally 3.5 years ago. Tetsuya Yamagami pleaded guilty to murder when the trial opened in October, but had contested some other indictments. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung says the North is producing enough nuclear material each year to arm about 20 warheads. He also warned that Pyongyang was improving its long-range ballistic missile technology. The tech billionaire Elon Musk has picked another fight with the owner, this time of the successful Irish budget airline Ryanair. It's over the possible use of Mr. Musk's Starlink services, the satellites, on Ryanair's planes. The airline boss, Michael O'Leary, says he doesn't want them, arguing the aerial antenna would be a drag on the aircraft. And the American astronaut Suni Williams, who made global headlines when she became stranded on the International Space Station, has announced her retirement. Miss Williams' 2024 mission was supposed to involve a week-long stay on the ISS, but ended up lasting more than 9 months due to technical problems. And those are the headlines on The Globalist. 10:32 a.m. in Damascus, 8:32 a.m. in Zurich, 7:32 here in London. Now, one of the biggest tests of Syria's ability to move on from the era of Bashar al-Assad is whether the interim President Ahmed al-Sharaa could create a more inclusive country out of the myriad factions that want a slice of political power. A key group to win over have been the Kurdish-led militia, who controlled much of the north of the country, including Syria's gas and oil fields. Well, a deal's been struck over the terms under which the Kurds will join the new government. The agreement has been partnered by a ceasefire, but will it be enough? Well, I'm joined now from Istanbul by Monocle's correspondent in the city, Hannah Lucinda Smith. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning.
So a ceasefire has just been agreed, or in the last 24 hours or so. Could you just outline what is actually happening, please?
Yeah, so, I mean, when you look from the outside, obviously it's been more than a year since Bashar al-Assad fled Damascus, handing over the country basically to rebel forces that had been fighting him for more than a decade. From the outside, it might seem, OK, that's it, it's finished. But there is still this kind of internal struggle going on between the new government in Damascus and the Kurds, who control about a third, between a quarter and a third of the territory of the country. And as you said, critically, much of the gas and oil facilities. Now, clearly, the Damascus government, they want to have control over all of the country. They don't want this kind of, region, semi-autonomous region, whatever you want to call it, operating it by itself in the northeast. And there have been clashes, increasingly violent clashes over the past few weeks between those two forces, raising all kinds of fears of, Syria, which is an incredibly unstable state, an incredibly complex state, falling back into some kind of civil war. The other really big concern, particularly for countries like Britain, is that in that Kurdish-controlled area, you have camps where ISIS fighters, foreigners who went to fight alongside that jihadist group, are being held in prison. And particularly, the UK has a policy of not taking back its citizens who went to fight with ISIS. They're all in prison there, pretty much. What the Kurds are saying is, well, if we can't have some kind of agreement over what's going to happen here, why should we still be in control of these camps? And part of what's happened over the past few days is that they've handed control of Al-Hol, the biggest of those camps, to the central government in Damascus.
I mean, this opens up the wider question about how much the interim president is actually happy to decentralise power in his new government, because this is what ostensibly is what Syria needs in order for it to function.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he's not happy at all, as I think any new government in Damascus wouldn't be. And also, crucially, Turkey are really not happy. Turkey is one of the strongest allies of this new government in Damascus. Much of this Kurdish-controlled territory abuts the Turkish border. And the Kurdish forces that are in control of that territory are an offshoot of another group in Turkey, a Kurdish group called the PKK, which has fought this long-running insurgency against the Turkish state. So it's really a kind of security problem all round. It's really hard to see how any of the countries in the region, not just the government in Damascus, would kind of allow this situation to carry on.
Indeed. I mean, let's open this up to the regional question of stability and instability. I mean, Syria's progress in the last 12 months has been breathtaking given what it went through under Bashar al-Assad. But how worried are the neighbours that Syria cannot get a handle on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, this is the major problem. And, in other areas, as you say, Syria, in the space of a year turned around from being pretty much an international pariah with friends only really in Tehran and Moscow, a few other places, to really kind of being welcomed back into the global fold, particularly by the US, Donald Trump, who's obviously met Shara, also by Gulf countries, also by Turkey. It's really making strides in trying to rejoin the international economy to kind of secure the security situation within the country. But this is the last real problem. And if it is not solved, the danger is that Syria once again becomes this kind of island of instability in the middle of a really, really key region. It's hardly a stable region around it. You've got countries like Israel on one side, you've got Iraq, also Turkey, which is has its own problems as well. And if Syria is destabilized, you have the problem of radicalism perhaps coming back. ISIS is not a defeated force in this country. There are still many, many cells operating. We saw an attack on US forces a couple of months ago. You have the question of will more refugees travel to Europe? That was also a massive, massive problem for the EU and also for Britain. It's really destabilized Europe. So if Syria doesn't manage to get a handle on this and doesn't manage to come to some kind of agreement, whether that be some kind of semi-autonomy in that region, whether that be that region being completely reabsorbed, but the Kurds given, a really, really key roles within the government, then it's going to be a problem not just for Syria, but for the whole region as well.
Anna Lucinda Smith, Monocle's Istanbul correspondent, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. Let's have a roundup of the latest news from Japan. Hendel Hento is contributing writer at the Japan Times. He joins us from our studio in Tokyo. Good afternoon, Hendel. How's it looking where you are?
Good morning. It's looking great.
Good. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, we've only just had a little bit of breaking news coming through, so the details are sketchy. But the man who shot the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been sentenced to life in prison. This is Tetsuya Yamagami. What do we know?
I mean, it was kind of expected. The sentence, the prosecutors were asking for life in prison, while the defendants were like kind of asking for a bit more leniency for like a 20-year sentence because of his situation. So if you remember, like Yamagami was a victim of the Unification Church here. It's like a religious organization. Some people call it a cult. And that was from South Korea. That was very influential here. In Japan, I was like kind of like tied up with the ruling party, the Liberal Democratic Party. So Yamagami, his mother, donated a lot of money to the church and kind of like, bankrupted the family, and that really affected him. So when he saw the relationship of Shinzo Abe with the church, he sent like congratulatory messages, and he basically associated the former Prime Minister Abe with the church. And an opportunity presented itself during a campaign event. Then, well, we know what happened. He basically made a homemade weapon because, guns are so hard to get in Japan, and then he shot Abe in broad daylight. So some people thought that he might get the death sentence, but that was really never in the cards, because in Japan that's only applied for, murders that involve multiple victims or stuff like that. But like Yamagami was actually, he did everything in broad daylight. He didn't attempt to escape. He had like a motive that inspired sympathy. So the sentence that was kind of expected, because Abe was the person that he was life. The maximum sentence was life sentence, and that's what he got.
Hendel, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to date on that. What other news are you covering at the moment where you are?
Well, I mean, this year is an interesting year. There have been like several developments that are like kind of coming to a head. The first one is there's been a push by the Japanese government to shift savings, the considerable savings that are in cash in Japan, towards investments. So in Japan, like the level of savings is more around household savings are around over 50% are in cash, which is incredibly high compared to the US or Europe, right? So they've been trying to shift this towards investments, and they launched like a system called NISA, the Nippon Individual Savings Account, which is based in the UK. The one you have in the UK called the ISA, the Individual Savings Account. So last year they revamped the system. They made it much more attractive. And this year they're expanding it to include children. So parents can start investing on behalf of their children since they're born until they are 18 years old, at which point, the account moves over to the children.
Sorry to interrupt you. Are people more willing to take more risks in this way?
Actually, that's an interesting question because, I mean, the Japanese investors have been very risk averse because of the situation with Japan stocks, right? So Japan, the Nikkei average crashed in around 1989 and lost like 80% of its value. It didn't climb up to the previous level for 30 years. So people have been very reluctant, but recently Japanese stocks have been doing very well. They actually outperform US stocks, right? So Japanese investors have been willing to shift savings from assets to stocks. And that has been, I think, I mean, it's still very high, but we are seeing like people like being more willing to invest in stocks and in riskier assets for sure.
It looks as if from the stories that we're covering today suggests that there seems to be sort of more profound societal change occurring. It's sort of, we're on the tip of it in Japan, given the fact that I think another thing that you want to talk about is the momentum towards same-sex marriage with couples suing the government. So are people taking more of an initiative here?
I think so. I think people just got tired of waiting for the government to do something about it, right? There is like a big disconnect between public opinion and the ruling class, the political class, right? There have been like a number of surveys, and all of them in recent surveys, all of them, the level of support for same-sex marriage in Japan has been over 70%, sometimes as high as 80-something%, right? So they just got tired of waiting, and they decided to do something proactively. So I think it was 2019. The first lawsuits, a number of couples got together, sued the government, and especially from last year, 2024 and 2025, a number of high courts, the one level below the Supreme Court, all of them said that the ban was unconstitutional, right? The big surprise was last year, 2 months ago in November, the Tokyo High Court actually upheld the ban, right? That was a big shock for everybody. But the positive point about this is because now there is no consensus, now there is a conflict, the Supreme Court might actually step in earlier than they would have otherwise. So this year, we might finally have a decision by the Supreme Court that finally decides, that settles the matter, right? So that's something to look forward to.
Handel Hento in our Tokyo Bureau, thank you so much for joining us on The Globalist.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS. Banking is our craft.
An update now from the world of luxury. The time here in London, 7:45. And we're speaking of time because Brenda Tui's here, Monocle's luxury markets editor. She's here to talk about watches. Good morning, Brenda.
Hi, good morning, Emma.
How are we?
I am fantastic.
I know you're fantastic, but how are you feeling? She's come in, and is it that, if there's anybody who comes in with the most elegantly tied scarf, it's Brenda Tui. She can tie a scarf like no one else on earth.
It's all about scarves this season.
It literally is just about the scarves, and it's all about the watches. Tell us about LVMH Watch Week.
So LVMH Watch Week started in 2020. It's a kind of a traveling affair. It pops up in different cities, Dubai, New York. This year it was in Milan, in various LVMH boutiques, like maybe Bulgari or Tag Heuer or Tiffany or Zenith. It could also pop up in a hotel. Just depends what they feel like. So they are showcasing their special launches.
Okay, and what was the special launch of the year, or what were people focusing on?
Well, I think that they were focusing on 2 quite different styles. Hublot, for example, who celebrated 20 years in the business, launched the Unico, which is really a look back to what they were doing when they launched. So it's the Big Bang, but in different materials. Okay. So ceramic, titanium. There was a lot of black in that Big Bang. So it's quite a sexy beast, really. It's big, it's bold, it's a Big Bang.
So it mirroring what is dare happening in the outside of world at the moment. It's sort of sexy and black and Big Bang. It seems as if it's sort of we're more muscular in our approach here. Is that what you notice?
I think Hublot is always quite muscular and powerful in their approach. But by contrast, you could look at what Gerald Genta, what that beautiful, elegant watch brand had to offer. They had, these fabulously gadrooned bezels in white gold and in shades of butterscotch, wonderful kind of contrasting dials in butterscotch or dove gray. So elegant with a leather strap. I mean, the antithesis of Hublot's fabulous Big Bang, very elegant, very chic for the man, the super chic man.
Let's go to Paris, to Paris High Jewels. What's happening this weekend?
Well, it all kicks off on Sunday with Dior, and Dior really do things on a fabulous level. They have set designers who come in and create a sort of Dior magical fantasy land. I mean, last year there were trees, there were leaves, there were flowers. It really is like going on some kind of a magical mystery tour. It really is fantastic. It's all over you. It's above, it's beside. There's the music. There's, everything. It's just gorgeous. And then there are the high jewels to really knock the sight out of your eyes. Last year, they were pinks and purples, fabulous colored gemstones in a multitude of different styles of jewelry. There was even a tiara. Who knows what there's going to be this year? I'm particularly looking forward to Messika. Last year, they did a lot of black and white, contrasting, very modern, very bold jewelry. And De Beers, I'm looking forward to also. Boucheron, Claire Chouin, the creative director at Boucheron. She never, ever disappoints.
And in what way, given the fact that when you are designing the sort of at the absolute highest level, obviously this takes time and this takes craftsmanship, but the idea that you can differentiate with just the most exquisite of material.
The most exquisite of material, the whitest diamonds, the best platinum, the high carat gold. But it's not just that, Emma. Last year at Boucheron, they invited us in, writers, journalists, influencers probably, into a room, and then they turned all of the lights off, which, is quite unnerving at any level. I mean, it was pitch dark. And then, in the distance, the jewels appeared. White gold, white diamonds, like flowers in a vase. It was really, really startling. And because you had been left in the dark, this sudden appearance of this art form, really, high jewelry, one-off pieces worth millions. It really is just spectacular. So it's not often just the jewelry itself. It's the way that it is presented.
Brenda Toohey, Monocle's luxury markets editor, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're listening to The Globalist. Finally, let us head back to Switzerland, where there are moving parts. At the moment, Donald Trump was supposed to be arriving at Zurich Airport in Air Force One and then was heading up into the mountains. This has not happened because there has been an electrical problem with Donald Trump's plane. To bring us up to date, Laura Kramer, our senior producer, has headed out to the airport to find out what's going on. Laura, good morning.
Good morning, Emma. I'm so sorry if you start hearing my teeth chattering because it is a balmy -3 degrees here at the platform B where I'm viewing the airports. You can probably hear an airplane behind me now. But yes, so the press pool time for the original flight at Joint Base Andrews was around 8 p.m. local time. And Air Force One had to turn around about an hour into his flight, which means that they did take a different plane, not Air Force One, which makes the plane spotters that I am surrounded by incredibly disappointed, as you can imagine, because they're very excited about seeing it land. There are about 50 or so plane spotters, and I have to say, it's all ages. It's really nice to see. However, I am one of about 3 women here. So right now, President Trump is due to arrive at the airport at around 11, a little bit after 11 o'clock. Now, earlier, you can't really see, actually, I have to say, you can't really see the planes landing. The fog is very thick, but earlier I spoke to a future pilot, a 15-year-old plane spotter, Ben O'Sullivan, and he told me how the handover is meant to happen with President Trump once he actually does land here at Zurich. Take a listen.
I saw the helicopter formation basically do their training flight on Sunday. So they're flying from the Dubendorf Air Base to the airport, and then they're going to taxi behind the Terminal E, kind of out of sight, and then they're going to come back out onto the runway, and then this whole convoy of helicopters are going to fly to Davos.
But do you think it's going to happen? It's quite foggy.
It depends. Basically, the visibility is a problem, so if they can't see enough, they're probably just going to take the cars.
Right, let us head to our Studio 4 at our Zurich headquarters. Our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, is there standing by. Good morning, Tyler.
Good morning, Emma. I'm more Studio 4 and having good morning, Laura, as well, because everybody is deployed elsewhere, so there's no one to run the desk. So I'm joining you from outside our HQ here in Zurich. It's a fascinating story to of course follow right now because of course I mean, you could say technically Air Force One is coming because anytime an aircraft carrying the president on board it becomes Air Force One. So in this case, though, it is not the 4-engine 747, of which there are a few. And this is what's interesting. Normally, there's a 747 backup as well. So it's interesting that he didn't get on another 747. So he's coming in on a 757, a 2-engine plane. It's like, of course, the 747. It's old. I mean, this is an aircraft. I think it's over 30 years old, 32 years old. So it's the type of aircraft that's still flying around a lot in the the services of United Airlines, Iceland Air. So it's not going to be the fanfare, and as Laura said, it's just not the hulking image of Air Force One as we know it. Nevertheless, it is Air Force One designated, but sort of Air Force One in drag, you could almost say.
Indeed. I mean, just reading into it, it's a modified 757, normally used for domestic trips to smaller airports. It's narrow-bodied. He's not going to like that, is he, Tyler?
Well, it doesn't have a staircase either, so we're not talking about a double-decker aircraft. It doesn't have the presence, and of course, why does Laura have 50-some plane spotters around her? Because this aircraft, it is, of course, it's an icon. It is a symbol of American power. We talk about sense of arrival. That is sense of arrival. Nevertheless, of course, there are U.S. military helicopters. Of course, when he's on board one of the Navy or Marine helicopters, it becomes Marine One, and this will be literally the formation that will take him up to Davos, weather permitting. In the city here in Zurich, it is quite clear actually right now. The airport is often a slightly different problem. There's a mountain in between, but it looks like I can already see patches of blue. So I think by the time they land, and I think 11 o'clock is optimistic, because when I was looking, he's only just gone beyond Newfoundland recently. So unless that thing has got some sonic boosters on it, he's going to hustle. But of course, it's throwing the whole schedule into disarray up in Davos today.
Well, I mean, this is something that the FT is covering in quite a lot of detail, the speculation as to what happens when the utterly tightly run ship of Davos has to accommodate the fact that, dare we say it, the main star is late. I mean, there are risks, and the FT this morning is saying that it could actually completely flip the whole schedule of WEF.
Well, absolutely. I can tell you that we had a head of state who was going to be coming here later today, and I just received an email from his team saying, much uncertainty, not sure if we're going to make it because President DJT is currently up in the air. So, and obviously it does signal, of course, that other leaders have to hang around as well. It also suggests that there are indeed going to be conversations, and maybe that was not going to be the case yesterday, but I think often off the back of course, Prime Minister Carney, President Macron, I think what was said on stage, there's obviously going to be some closed-door sessions today.
Indeed. I mean, we mentioned this at the beginning of the programme, not necessarily the aggression, but the sort of the united muscular front that Mark Carney and Ursula von der Leyen and Emmanuel Macron in his aviators fronted up saying, Mr. Trump, we are ready for you. When he delays, does that actually sort of place the balance of power back into Donald Trump's position? Or does it mean that Davos can all stand and sort of like say, OK, we're waiting for you now?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit reporting to the principal's office in that respect. Listen, of course, there's probably no sense of Trump, of course, feeling intimidated by any of this. But of course, it is that sort of marching down the hallway. I think his team is clearly. The Trump team, that is, they're obviously wondering, what is going to be said. Of course, we have to recognize that there are conversations going into the background, and there are surely lots of advisors, plenty of diplomats having a conversation before that happens. But nevertheless, we know what he's like. We watched that rambling press conference last night, and he's going to be the one who's ultimately going to call the shots.
Indeed, I hate to think what the catering department's doing as well. Laura, we have about 20 seconds to come back to you at Zurich Airport. Do we know what's going to happen when Donald Trump arrives?
Well, I'm hoping there's going to be a great big cheer. I really want a lot of fanfare to happen. But in the meantime, I will be here. I will also be appearing on the briefing. I'll be talking to more plane spotters. They've got really great technology here. They can hear the air traffic control, and they're really excited to see what's going to happen for the new Air Force One, as Tyler said, with Donald Trump in it.
Laura Kramer at Zurich Airport and our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, at our Zurich headquarters. Thank you both. And as Laura has just mentioned, we will be in Davos for the briefing coming to you from 1300 Zurich time. Carlotta Rebello is your host for that. And then later on, we're off to Greenland again for the Monocle Daily, where Andrew Muller will be standing by to bring us the view from the country, well, the location which is at centre stage at the moment. But for now, that's all the time we have for today's episode of The Globalist. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers Hassan Anderson, Angelica Jobson and Monica Lillis. Our researcher was Annalise Maynard. Our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. After the headlines, more music on the way. Stay tuned. There's lots to come on Monocle Radio. For now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.
With UBS, you have a truly global partner, incorporating new technologies, innovative approaches, and unexpected opportunities, leading you to insights that help answer the questions that matter, delivered with passion, care, and unmatched expertise. Because it's about rising with the dawn each day, knowing that we can do even better. That's what banking is to us. Not just work, but a craft. UBS. Advice is our craft.